I'm Nick Romano. I'd like to welcome you back to the channel. It's so good to have you here as we continue to explore the wonderful world of sim racing. Would you just give me one moment?
Shake it off, and then just beat the devil out of it.
Well, golly gee, everyone, the internet really liked that last video. I guess I figured out what sort of content I should be creating. Screw real-life racing and my experience as an instructor. The people want video games! Seriously though, I was pleasantly surprised with how many y'all agree with my hot take on AC versus iRacing. Turns out I'm not the only one frustrated with how iRacing takes real-world experience of driving at the limit, throws it in a dumpster, lights a dumpster on fire, and shoves it out of an airlock into a black hole made out of chainsaws. Of course, there certainly were the haters too. Thanks for helping make my video popular, Lesson 3. This group almost exclusively consisted of the iRacing fanboys who were absolutely incensed that anyone could possibly suggest that iRacing is anything less than the pinnacle of racing realism. iRacing hands down. Anyone who has raced a car on track agrees for realism. Wait a minute, I've raced a car on track. Oh God, how can this be? I don't feel so good. Oh, thank God they wrote me back in. One of the games that gets the most hate from this elitist group of sin connoisseurs is Project Cars 2, and my God are they vocal about just how terrible it is. But is it? I say nay, good sirs and madams. Or, I guess. I guess just sirs. Jesus. So since Project Cars 3 is on the horizon and already being lambasted for the devs' admittedly questionable decisions, let's take a final look back at the last installment from Slightly Mad Studios and see where it sits on the sim spectrum. P-Cars 2 is like a Buick LaCrosse. Nobody's quite sure if it's an affordable luxury car or a Chevy Impala with lipstick and a wig on. It exists in this middle ground limbo. It can't go to the high-end luxury car parties for fear of being laughed at, and anybody looking for comfort on a budget is just going to buy a used Lexus anyway. According to the internet, this game is classified as a simcade. Not quite an arcade game, not quite a sim. And this means that it doesn't really get any love from anyone, which is unfortunate because there really is a lot to like here. First off, it actually looks and performs like a finished product, which is way more than can be said for the big two. And cars actually feel really different from each other. There are incredibly different racing experiences to be had when racing a GT3 car versus racing a Trans Am meathead of a Chevy Camaro. Even within GT3, there's a lot of realistic variance. This feels legitimately like a Porsche where you rotate the pants off of it and drive entirely off of the rear end. And this feels like a cigarette-smoking, turbo-leggy twitch box of ennui. Both are fast and competitive, but require very different driving styles to extract their speed. And oversteer mostly works, which if you watched my last video, go watch my last video, you will know is a really big deal for anybody who's actually interested in pushing a car to its limit in a realistic way. I've had the 911 GT3 what can only be described as butt naked sideways, and if you're quick with your reactions, you can pull out of it and even maintain a realistic amount of speed while doing it. Plus, there's a whole lot of fun to be had with the rallycross cars and track, chucking cars taillights first into corners, letting the all-wheel drive and rally tires claw your way to the exit, or doing some sort of approximation in a 66 Mustang Fastpack, which, man... try this. The problem the critics seem to have with it the most is the tire physics model, which is pretty funny coming from the iRacing Club for reasons I've already gone into in depth. But I've asked a bunch of people to describe what they don't like, and I've never gotten a straight answer. Some say it has too much grip, while others say the cars slide everywhere. I feel like it's unlikely that the game exists on some astral plane where the classical gods of grip are toying with drivers' emotions. So, let's take a deep dive here and explore P-Cars 2 to see if those arguments hold up. As far as I'm concerned, there are three main factors to how accurate a handling model is in a racing sim. Number 1! How much detail is there in the way the tires interact with the road surface? This includes things like changes in surface type or condition, bumps, curbs, paint, etc. Yeah, pretty good. The cars behave the way I'd expect when the front or the back of the car gets light, when I use a curb, when I transition to a different surface, or when I get sent to space. Number 2! How faithfully does the game replicate the transition from grip to slip, i.e. driving within the traction limits of the tire and then pushing past that point and then returning? Remember my point about how an experienced real-life driver should be able to get into a sim and just do what feels natural to them, and the sim should respond the way they expect? Well, that's what I'm getting here. When the front tires begin to lose grip, I naturally feather the skinny pedal to get a little more bite in the front end. It does what I expect. Go too far and the rear end starts to slip instead, and whatever combination of counter steering or throttle management that my muscle memory does seems to work exactly like it should. I'm not fighting the car. I'm in an intimate dance with it as we float together through the bends. No death twitch, no sudden unrecoverable hook spins. And number 3, how much of that information is conveyed to the driver through the force feedback provided in the steering wheel. Again, pretty damn good. The steering force loads up as you approach the limits of traction and begin to fall away as you reach the peak of the curve. You know, just like real life. This is the exact same seat of the pants info I use from the wheel when driving IRL. And here's something even Assetto Corsa doesn't get right. The way you can feel the body roll of the car, not just the forces on the wheels themselves. This quick snap from one direction to another is really important info in high-speed S's when you have to delicately balance a load from side to side, and my god does P-Cars 2 have this on lock. So, surface interaction, grip 2 slip, and force feedback. If you get all 3 of those things right, you've got a pretty faithful simulation on your hands. And if everything I just said is accurate, it is. Project Cars 2 is, in these respects, a faithful simulation. And don't get me wrong, P-Cars 2 is in no way perfect. No sim is. But all the negative feedback it gets from the tryhards seem to come from people who either A, don't have the real-world experience to back up their sim racing experience, B, have real-world experience but aren't yet at the level where they're consistently driving at the peak of tires' grip limit and using the slip angles of the tires as part of their driving repertoire, and yet spout off their opinions like gospel, or C, are too busy polishing that chocolatey brown iRacing set to shine on their proverbial online noses to come up with their own thoughts to even question what the experts say when they post online. Like, seriously, I even got some of this in the comments from my last video from the people who were agreeing with me. Who the hell am I? Just because I'm speaking confidently about a subject online doesn't mean I actually have any idea what I'm talking about. I do, but that's not the point. So, getting back to where P-Cars 2 sits in the grand scheme of sims, what does it have to offer? Do I believe it has a better tire model than iRacing? Hold on. Yes, I do. The V7 tire updates on iRacing have made improvements as some cars are getting closer to reality now. But P-Cars 2 had this sorted out when it was launched. Do I think it's a better platform for online racing? Definitely not. For that, iRacing is still king. That being said, if you join a league, you can have extremely high quality racing in any game with just a little bit of legwork. I'm going to make another important point here, and that is that the actual racecraft you employ while playing a sim doesn't care whatsoever how accurate or inaccurate the tire dynamics of your game are. Racecraft refers to the way you position yourself to set up for a pass, the way you drive defensively without all-out blocking, the strategies you employ during a sprint race versus an endurance race, when you're on pole or when you're fighting through the field. For example, a very common technique used in racing is called the over-under maneuver, where you set someone up for a pass a corner before you actually execute. Let's go back to Laguna Seca to demonstrate this. First, in iRacing. Car B wants to overtake Car A in turn 4. B gets a great run out of turn 3, so A moves to cover the inside, forcing B to the outside. Now it's a drag race to turn 4 and a bravery contest to who can brake latest, or so Car A thinks. Car B psychs him out, brakes at a totally reasonable place, cuts back underneath for a late apex line and early throttle on the exit, and easily sails by Car A down the next straightaway. Did you get all that? Now, let's see if that holds up in P-Cars 2. Sweet, let's go even further down the imaginary internet pecking order with Forza. Nah, not that Forza, this Forza! Cool, how about this? You get my point. So if you're after realistic racing, the focus should be on the racing aspect, not necessarily having the most incredibly detailed handling model. But all that being said, I'll say my previous point one more time for the people in the back.
P-Cars 2 is a better tire model than iRacing.
So my point about focusing more on the racecraft aspect than the handling model is actually moot, since this game actually does have a really good handling model too. So who's complaining about the handling of this game again? I gave this some thought, and most drivers can be divided into 2 categories. 1, the precision drivers, who take a very mathematical approach to racing. Threshold brake at the 2 marker, trail off 40% as you turn in 25 degrees progressively, transition to maintenance throttle, and use only as much acceleration as you can without upsetting the car on exit. For this group, iRacing probably works great, since they strive to always be within the limits, until they do make a mistake and find themselves staring down a freight train of 13-year-olds who, let's face it, aren't going to change their braking zone for your benefit. And 2, the slip angle drive-by field Chad, who goes by the sensation of speed, the g-forces, and the lateral movement of the tires to string together fast laps, usually with a fair bit of opposite line. These are my Assetto Corsa brethren, and for them, the P-Cars 2 model should work, since many cars in the game reward this sort of driving. Again, like real life. Also, for the record, the lap times between these 2 groups can be basically identical, but when conditions become less than ideal, you can safely put your money on the Chadster. If you couldn't guess, it's probably Group 1 drivers who don't like P-Cars 2 and Group 2 drivers who do, or would if they gave it a chance. And this brings me back to my earlier note about the cars in the game having a lot of handling variance between each other. Some cars will favor Group 1, while some will favor Group 2. you know, like real life. You can't expect your driving style to suit every car out there. Even top-level F1 drivers will be bested by top-level oval racers when racing on ovals, and vice versa. So if this car slides too much, maybe that doesn't mean the game is wrong, maybe it means you haven't adapted your driving to what that car needs. The thing is though, I really don't care what game you're playing. If you enjoy iRacing, that's great. You have a lot of people who agree with you who you can play with. Do you enjoy Project Cars 2? Great. Me too, and you also have a lot of others who agree with you, even if they're afraid to speak up in the Facebook sim racing groups for fear of being crucified.
Well, in conclusion...
Psych! This video isn't just about Project Cars 2, it's also about elitism in sim racing. Seriously, you video game boys can be a toxic bunch sometimes. I've been watching this happen over and over in the Facebook groups. Post a video of your new sim setup that you finally put together after saving your pennies for months. How can you even race with that tiny field of view? Geez, go buy a triple screen. Ask for advice on improving the feedback on your Logitech G29 wheel. You can solve that problem with a direct drive. Stop being a peasant and go spend more money. Offer an example of a pro driver critiquing the tire model in that one game. They don't know what they're talking about. Only real sim racers get it. Wow, sim racing really is realistic, isn't it? F in the chat for anyone who's on the ground floor and trying to learn and upgrade as they go. So anyway, is Project Cars 2 the ultimate racing simulator? Probably not, but does it have a lot to offer, including great handling dynamics that do not get the credit they deserve and probably the most beautiful and immersive racing experience on the market today? Very yes. Let's wrap this bad boy up. Project Cars 2 is good. Enjoy whatever game you enjoy. Ask your doctor if your heart is healthy enough to reflect on whether or not you have the real-world experience to qualify as an expert. And keep your negativity to yourself because nobody gives a damn what you think. Nick, out. That was very rude of me. Here, I'll just put you back.